Have you ever had the experience of working at a job and there's a bad employee, and maybe they're maliciously bad, or maybe they're just not very good at the job they're assigned, but either way, the manager just will not get rid of them? And I'm not saying that you want them to lose their job, but when there's a bad employee on the team, you feel that dragging down everyone else's morale. When a manager doesn't get rid of a bad employee, it turns the good employees into, at best, mediocre, numb employees, and at worst, they're going to be no employees because they're going to leave. People can't handle working with somebody who isn't doing the job and that they have to pick up the slack for. So, why am I bringing this up? Well, the thing is, you are the company you keep. I'm not really in the internet commentary space, but I just couldn't resist making a video after seeing not just the QT Cinderella videos and the reactions to those videos, and then the reactions to those reactions. The point is that I need to say something because I think a lot of things are getting lost in the drama of it all. I know, I hate to say that word. And listen, I do not believe at all that the marginalization of people of color, the queer people, trans people, any marginalized community, that is not just drama, okay? And if anyone ever tries to tell you that things that concern your human rights are just drama, they need to be at least sat down and, have a real talking to. However, when I say drama, what I mean is that when people are emotional and, things are running hot, they're going to have more emotional reactions than being able to process exactly why they're having those feelings. And something I had to learn as a person with various mental illnesses is that if you can recognize the beginning of the feeling or identify the root of the feeling, it's a lot easier to not necessarily control not having the feeling, controlling how you respond, certainly. I really don't want to put any clips of the QT Vanilla Katie stream in this video because, frankly, it's just really hard to watch. And I think enough people have included it in their videos now that if you wanted to watch the whole thing, you definitely could find it. However, I am just going to give a quick summary for anyone who possibly would click on this video and doesn't know the story. That basically, in a live stream, QT Cinderella was waiting for Vanilla Mace and Katie to have a game download, and in that silence she kind of she being QT Cinderella kind of went off the rails a little bit in terms of trying to express uh, what was not a very good opinion, in my opinion. And not only was it not a very good opinion, but it also was expressed extremely poorly. And I know that not all of us are super articulate, and actually, if there's one thing that I've learned watching true crime, it's that TV has really given us a false impression of how well any person speaks. Professional lawyers who have done this all their lives, who make a living out of orating, trip over their words and stumble and misspeak all the time. So I think we just maybe need to keep that in consideration. However, that was not this. There was a combination of things, but I'm just saying that because a lot of people were excusing the badness of the opinion by being like, oh, she's just socially awkward. I mean, even Cutie Cinderella herself was like, I'm really socially awkward. And I sympathize with that to a degree. But I mean, she can't be that socially awkward because she's like one of the biggest streamers on Twitch. But it's also not just that she's successful, it's also that she has a lot of privileges. Obviously, being white is a big one. I'm also white, so I'm only able to give that perspective. The other thing is that she is very, very beautiful and clearly has money. And so it's like, at what point can social awkwardness no longer be used for an excuse? Like, if you've managed to do all of this and become this person and use all of these privileges to your advantage, how can you claim to still be so socially awkward that you can't properly express your opinion about human rights or any subject, to be honest? Anyways, getting back to the original stream, the problem sort of was intensified because not only was this very bad opinion being given, but also like it was very obvious that Vanilla and Katie were very uncomfortable and that they were like, please, can we move off the topic? Like with their faces. I think even Vanilla may have like hinted at it a few times, but like obviously no one wants to just tell their friend to shut up, especially not in front of thousands of people on live. However, it also kind of amplifies the problem that not only was she having this extremely bad opinion at this extremely inappropriate time, she was also on a live stream with two queer creators. So she was just kind of not getting it, and it was very clear that she was not getting it. And then I think the apology was not good either. And again, I don't really want to put clips of it because that's sort of not the important part of what I'm talking about today. There are lots of drama creators out there who are covering specifically like about QT herself, but I want to look at her situation and then sort of blow it up to the larger picture of how this kind of thing happens, how it has become so prevalent, and also how we do need to accept that we are the company we keep. We are. You know what they say, you are what you eat. So if you're consuming somebody's thoughts, then you are at least complicit with those thoughts. So, yeah, her apology was bad. And then, weirdly, a lot of hate was being directed at Vanilla Mace after the stream because I guess people expected her to do more work to call out QT and to, hold her accountable or to even cut her off because she expressed very clearly in that video that she's perfectly comfortable keeping extremely transphobic people in her life, people who can't even do something as easy as changing somebody's pronouns. So, like, in any case, vanilla is not the problem here, okay? That much should be very obvious. But I think the reason that she was having this reaction being kind of launched at her, projected upon her, is because people who are advocates in general are obviously held to a higher standard. And so, like, people who are used to seeing her speak out against other people are probably expecting her to speak out against anyone. However, however, there's a little something I want to talk about right now called the bystander effect. If you identified as a girl while you were in middle or high school, then you've probably heard lots about bystander effect. Just a quick summary again for anyone who possibly doesn't know, the bystander effect is when everybody thinks that somebody else will say something or take care of a problem, and then nobody does because it's, oh, I'm not directly involved and I'm sure somebody else will fix it. The reason I bring up why girls specifically know a lot about that is because in our self defense units in health class, in high school at least, this was true for me, they teach you to never yell if you're being attacked, assaulted. They tell you never to yell the word that you're having you know what I mean. Sorry, YouTube. They tell you to yell fire because people come when there's a fire. And that's likely to get people's attention, but people will likely bystander, you know. It's also the same reason why in health and safety class, when they're teaching you the whole emergency response thing, that they tell you to look somebody in the eyes and tell them, call 911. This is very important actually for anybody. If you're ever helping somebody in an emergency and there's a big crowd of people and you're going to start doing CPR or something or start tending to wounds, you need to pick a person, look them in the eyes, and say, you call 911. Because if you just yell, someone call 911, nobody's going to do it. That's another thing. It's the bystander effect. Everyone thinks someone else will do it. So, am I bringing this up because I'm going to tell you that both Vanilla and Katie each thought the other one was going to call out Cutie and then neither of them did? Mm, no. I mean, maybe that happened, but I doubt it. Here's why I'm bringing up the bystander effect. Part of the reason the bystander effect happens at almost every turn, and very predictably so, you can look up the studies, um, is because humans have a shock response that kind of prevents us from knowing exactly what to do right away. That's why somebody who is really quick-witted or can come up with a really like nasty comeback right away, or freestyle rappers, for example, like those are real skills and those are really impressive talents because often like you think of a great comeback like the next day or hours later because your brain has to sit with that information, often sleep on it. It has to chew on it and process it. And that just takes time. And it's actually sort of the same thing with bad stuff. I mean, sure, we'd all like to think that we would call out, if we saw somebody hit their kid or if we saw someone kick their dog. Um, but you would be surprised at how difficult it actually is to be angry with someone in the moment when you are surprised and almost can't believe what you're seeing or hearing. And I'd actually like to give you a very recent personal example of this happening because I'd like to think that I'm a good friend and I look out for people who I love and care about. But recently I was at one of my friends, my good friends, parents' funeral. One of their parents passed away. And after a very difficult visitation, um, we were standing outside of the funeral home on the front steps. And I'm sorry, it's a little difficult to talk about because I feel some shame and also I feel still quite a bit of anger, shame for not doing something in the moment and anger for the person who did the thing. But here's what happened. Um, Another person, a mutual friend, who is known for being quite selfish and honestly narcissistic, person who I've been making my distance from for quite some time, decided to start screaming at the friend who had lost their parent on the steps of the funeral home because they were having a fit over some very innocuous thing. I'm not going to say the exact details because I don't need it getting around, but it was basically something on the equivalent of like where we were going to go to eat, or like who was going to sit where in the Uber, like such ridiculously low stakes crap. And this person who had just seen the casket holding their parent's body standing outside after this horribly long visitation and everything, the friend starts screaming selfishly. And I was standing right beside them. And I want to say that I did something in the moment, but I didn't. I just stared, big eyes. I didn't do anything in that moment, sadly. I just took part in the conversation, we all kind of just pretended it didn't happen. Things were said later, things were dealt with. That person is no longer in any of our lives. That was literally the final straw. But there were 3, 4 friends there who loved that person who'd lost their parent, would 100% take a bullet for them. But when someone started screaming at them and being mean to them, none of us acted. We didn't know what to do in that moment. So it's not only ridiculous to have Vanilla getting all this hate for not speaking up when, first of all, that's not her position, her job. Just because she is an advocate for some things doesn't mean she has to be in advocacy mode 100% of the time. And also, like, she may have just been in shock. And I believe if you watch her response, she does say something to that effect. Um, Honestly, they're all very hard watches. And again, I watched like them through other content creators. I thought that it was important as a jumping off point because the whole idea of you are the company you keep is a subject that I've been milling about in my head for quite some time, and it's been on my video list, and I just kind of needed good topic to sink my teeth into, and Cutie Cinderella kind of gave me a reason to talk, and yeah. Another element that plays into the bystander effect is people not necessarily completely understanding the dynamic between people. So, another personal example that I have from much longer ago was that one time in a public store, like middle of the day kind of thing, in a busy store, I was punched by ex-boyfriend in the arm, hard enough to bruise, but it was in front of like 10 people at least, were like in like probably arm's reach of me. And again, like nobody did anything. Everybody kind of averted their eyes. My ex at the time, or my boyfriend at the time, ex now obviously, was angry at something I'd said, and he just whipped around and right in, got wrong. And I was embarrassed. I was so embarrassed that that had happened. I just kind of shut down. And I was surprised that nobody said anything, but by the same token, I was actually kind of glad nobody said anything in the moment because I was so humiliated that I was a person who was dating a person who hit people, you know? And I'm not saying that what happened on the stream is equivalent to that. It's obviously not. It's a very different type of thing. It's using a big platform about like a much bigger societal issue versus like one person enduring violence from one other person. It's not comparable. But the reason I bring that example up also is because it's easy to get parasocial. And again, I hate to use that word. It's really like trendy word of the day, but it is true. People think that they know creators really, really well, and they don't. And you can watch my video about fan fiction and the relationship that toxic fans have with fandoms and how they hurt everybody so we can't have nice things. And I believe that the conversation that was happening right before this whole like weird cutie thing happened on the stream, like right before that, lady was talking about her viewers sort of infantilizing her and telling her that she looks tired and that she needs to go to bed. And I'm of two minds on that because I know it comes from a good place, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and I just don't think that you should be commenting on anybody's lifestyle if you don't know them on like a person to person basis. And no, I'm not talking about, oh, I've been a viewer every day for like 5 years or 10 years. It doesn't matter if you've never met them, if you've not spent time with them in person, like you don't know them. So with that conversation kind of being, I think, even potentially like the catalyst of the whole QT rant, because the whole idea was like fighting with like her audience about them calling her hateful because she was nice to Asmongold, and like that's a whole other like I don't want to talk about him either, to be perfectly honest with you. So all these people who just assume that they perfectly understand the dynamic between these three people are wrong. They're just wrong. And so to have this high expectation that, Vanilla especially is going to, pick up her sword and shield and go to battle just like on live stream without thinking or anything, which is exactly what got Cutie into trouble, right? Is like speaking without thinking. And this is why I don't know, like I'd like to try live streaming, but not being able to 100% control exactly which words go out there. Like I said, even the best, most educated, most articulate people will still screw up and word something badly, or they'll slip a phrase, turn a phrase, Freudian slip, what have you, right? And then you have clips and you have people using that as ammunition against you. And so I think it was completely unreasonable for people to expect this high standard of vanilla to just immediately start calling Cutie out because you don't understand their dynamic and you certainly don't understand who vanilla is and what her personal standards are for calling people out or for what conversations she has. You don't know if she's going to have a conversation with Cutie in private. You don't know how she planned to approach that situation. And I mean, now it's all happening publicly and there's like so many TikToks about it and everything. Just like, you know, try being respectful and treat content creators like the adults they are, if they are in fact adults. And don't infantilize people. People are capable of making their own decisions. And that's actually another part of what Cutie did wrong is that she is an adult who made decisions to not just say these things, but keep saying them and keep repeating them and just digging a hole deeper and deeper and deeper. The next part of this subject is giving grace versus call out culture. I really hope that you will hear me out when I say giving grace because I think that a lot of people are kind of using that in a escapist way to like escape responsibility. When I say giving grace, I just mean that I do think that there is a way to um, criticize people, to bring things to their attention, to encourage them to rephrase things. And this actually kind of will go into Hasan's take on the QD situation, which is actually going to come later. I'm going to talk about that in the next section. So stay with me. It's really more just about trying to understand and letting other people know what they don't understand. That makes any sense. Okay, so I'm sure I don't need to tell anybody here that, the way the YouTube algorithm works is that the more extreme an opinion you have, the more hardline stance you take, the more clicks you get, the more views you get, the more engagement you get, and the more money you get. And okay, that's fine if you want to do things that way. But real life is all nuance. And that's part of why internet culture doesn't really translate to real life. And I think that that's where a lot of these like disconnects are coming from is that online everybody can just put themselves into their little boxes and they can be completely insulated from other people's opinions, or they can just specifically seek out you know, content creators that they specifically want to disagree with or make videos about just to hate on them. And the reason I bring this up is because what that has done is it's really encouraged people to, you know, make things black and white, make them very binary. And the truth is that to communicate with people, real people, you have to be able to feel the nuance. You have to be able to see the gray. And this is coming from somebody who has a lot of trouble seeing the gray, okay? And part of that is due to one of my many mental illnesses. But more than that, it's that, when you have a very strong and what you believe is, you know, correct set of values. And the subject that is being broached is something that makes you very emotional because it affects you personally. In this case, when we're talking about marginalized people, specifically with Cutie Cinderella, she spoke about again how her stepfather, I believe, stepfather, I'm sorry, um, refuses to call her brother by the correct pronouns. And but she's still gonna have lunch with him tomorrow. And it's like, okay, as a queer person myself, again, I totally see why queer people are like, hey, like, I'm tired of giving people grace. I'm exhausted of trying to convince all these other people that I deserve the right to even just exist, like, let alone have God, the courtesy to be called by the correct pronouns. Like, do you see how ridiculous this is? So, the grace I'm talking about is not necessarily like, just, oh, ignore it, or, oh, just keep it in, or, oh, just let them try again without saying anything. Like, a lot of people have said this about this specific situation is that, like, just being like gooey and candy coated and sunshine and rainbows with topics that, concern people's actual human rights, it's not going to work. You have to be firm. You can't just fluffy words your way into convincing a previously hateful person or a previously just closed minded person into being more open minded. However, maybe it's unfortunate, but the thing is, we do still need people like Cutie Cinderella to use their platforms and be bigger and better voices for, subjects that matter, subjects that are affecting that people that she knows and people in general. The harsh truth of the world is that there's way more people who are always going to watch or listen to the pretty skinny blonde girl than they are going to listen to like a queer POC creator. And because of that, we need to get people who are reaching other audiences to be delivering messages that are, you know, just I'm sorry. I was trying to film this without editing too heavily because I think that it's important to be authentic about this kind of thing. And in fact, there's another problem was that Cutie's apology video, if it can so be called, came off as kind of insincere. It came off as very like formulaic influencer apology, which I can't believe we're still getting like these basic influencer apologies in the year 2025. Like, oh, like I need to be accountable and blah blah blah. Like she would have been better, honestly, just being like, I screwed up. I need to take some time away, and that would be it. But there was a bunch of justifying, and the truth is that if she had said like, my stepfather refuses to call my brother by their correct pronouns, but I'm still going to see him at Christmas and I'm probably not going to throw a pie in his face. You know, sometimes we got to live with that. But to go like, I'm going to have lunch with him and I'm going to buy him lunch and I'm going to, XYZ and, be besties with him because, he's still blah, blah, blah. That's where you're losing people, right? That's where she's losing people. I think what I'm trying to say here on the topic of giving grace is that people like QT need to give people like her father, stepfather, less grace and be more firm. And then I think that people like us maybe need to give people like Cutie more grace. See, I don't really want to say that, and there are a few reasons for this. Again, part of them I'm going to get to in the next section when I talk about Hasan's response. But the whole problem with what Cutie was saying was like, you can't fight hate with hate. You have to keep being nice because otherwise, racist, transphobe, sexist, whoever are never going to come to the other side because if you just make them feel isolated and alienated and that they're going to just get yelled at, then you'll never get through to them. And maybe there are some people who you'll just never get through to, and that might be a sad reality. I mean, I'm not going to give you a number for how many times you can try to get through to somebody because, like, it's going to be up to you. But I do think there should be a line somewhere, and you have to figure that out for yourself. And I think the problem that Cutie is bumping up against with the situation is that she is not putting a line down. She's not putting any kind of, stake on the line. Like her stepfather isn't losing anything uh, to him. You know what I mean? Like, obviously he's losing plenty, but like in his mind, right? She has to create stakes, and this is the same of anybody, right? It's like you have to find your line and then make the stakes that, like, if you don't meet this expectation, then might be that you are cut off or whatnot. Something I was explaining to a friend of mine recently, which is probably my favorite metaphor for explaining personal boundaries, is that if you imagine you are a house, right? And your personal boundaries are your fenced in lawn, right? Your front yard, backyard, side yard, whatever, right? You have a fence around your property. Those are your boundaries. You cannot tell your next door neighbor, your neighbor across the street, anybody what they can have on their lawn. That's their lawn. It's within their fences. You can't tell them yes, no, whatever, right? You absolutely can control what is allowed beyond your gates. So if somebody tries to tell you that putting down a boundary is trying to control their behavior, it's actually exactly the opposite. You're not trying to tell them what to have on their lawn. You're just telling them what's not welcome on yours. So I hope you can see with that metaphor what I'm saying when it comes to what I think, we all kind of need to look at in terms of where our lines are and what we allow past the fence, you know what I mean? And sadly, the other reality is that if you do decide to, let poison ivy grow all over your lawn, people aren't going to come past your gate because they don't want to get covered in poison ivy hives. If people realize that you're letting a bunch of transphobes past your gate, they're not going to want to hang out with you because, they don't want to get a bunch of transphobe cooties on them. I'm sorry, it's not a laughing matter. It's just that sometimes you have to bring a little levity to a situation that's serious or you'll go crazy. There's another really good saying or phrase that I heard recently. I don't know if it's from anywhere, but somebody I know said it to me, and it's something that I've really worked to internalize recently because it's so true. And that is, if somebody tells you information and you feel yourself getting viscerally upset, like worked into a lather, somebody is manipulating you. Now, look, I'm not telling you to not be upset by horrific things happening in the world, in history, and whatnot, but as functioning adults, even the mentally ill ones, we should be able to receive information, even about bad things, and be able to process it without losing our whole minds immediately. You know what I mean? Like in school, you learn about bad things happening, all kinds of historic atrocities and, peoples being wiped out and colonized and all that stuff. And it's awful. And a lot of times you do feel bad. You feel like, oh, I wish that didn't have to happen to those people. But you don't start crying, you don't burst into tears. And I'm not saying that you can't feel strongly about anything that isn't like directly personally attached to you. And certainly you are going to have more of a reaction the closer something is to you. But I think that sometimes, especially again, and this is going back to the whole internet thing, is when you are part of a culture that rewards like cutie Cinderella, worst take, or racist cutie Cinderella. I don't know, whatever they or Hasan, Piker, worst person in the world, or well, I mean, I'm sure you've seen 8,000 drama videos with the title like The Satisfying Downfall, The Horrible Story, The, you know, Insane Breakthrough. I don't, the ones I mean, right? The ones with the black ground and the red text. And anyway, when you live in a culture that rewards that kind of thing, you have people getting worked up into that kind of hot-blooded rage at the drop of a pin. And I think that having these really overwrought reactions instantly and just dogpiling on people who, yes, deserve to be criticized, 100% deserve to be criticized, but the visceral attack of, hating people, and I just feel like this isn't helpful either. And it seems like it's just a way to get people to keep picking teams, picking sides. Why is everybody always saying that there are sides? I mean, maybe there are sides if you want to picture like a infinite sided die where every single individual person represents a side, but there is no two sides. There is no themes. I mean, obviously, you're going to see some lines between like certain value sets. You can say that you're on the opposite side of a subject from somebody, but I do think that the whole like teams sides mentality not only further reinforces this overly binary system and culture that we're only cultivating more, like literally, and like the clickbaity culture is only getting worse, not better. And I mean, with TikTok and shorts, it's kind of taking clickbait and then making it into like ultra short form content. And I mean, yeah, it's giving us like collective ADHD, or ruining our attention spans or what have you. I hope that some of you are still with me because I do feel like a lot of these are important things to talk about, and maybe that we just haven't given enough thought to all of these roots of our feelings. And if we look at them, then maybe we can avoid such big blow ups in the future. I mean, if you like blow ups, then maybe this is what you wanted. But frankly, I think we'd all be better off if people were allowed to make mistakes sometimes. And I mean, look, being besties with a transphobe, not a mistake. That is a choice. But I just mean in general, you know? Next thing I want to talk about is probably going to sound a little bit like a tangent, like it's almost unrelated, but I promise you it does all connect. In 2022, I had the amazing fortune of getting to go see BTS in concert for their two Permission to Dance shows in Vegas, right? At the Allegiant Stadium. And I guess I haven't spent that much time in the States, and I have always gone to smaller events. So let me tell you, when my friend and I were walking from our hotel over to the stadium, we were not expecting to see a bunch of guys with like backpacks holding speakers in them and megaphones, hooked up to the speakers and carrying huge giant signs on, wooden stands. And yeah, if you couldn't guess, they were religious protesters, basically screaming at the hundreds of people walking over this bridge that leads from like the strip to Allegiant Stadium. They'd closed the road, so everybody was just walking. And right down the middle of this wave of people are these guys. And they're telling us that we're going to hell, that we're sinners, that we're worshiping the devil, that, we're, gonna burn, that we're horrible. And most people are just ignoring them. Normally, I often take the path of least resistance with people like that because, like, I'm not willing to get in a big fight, especially not when I'm looking forward to an event. And after the concert, I decided to message one friend of mine who is like quite a devout Christian and has studied a lot of her faith and everything. So I asked her about this kind of thing, and I was like, like, is K-pop really like a sin to these people? Like, do you think that? And basically the answer I got is that like Christians don't claim these guys. At least not all of them, obviously. But I guess I was just looking for an explanation of why people would do something so heinous at such like a joyful event. Like, I don't I don't like it. Okay. I don't like that people protest anywhere. But at least it like makes logical sense to them when they're protesting like pride parades or like at Planned Parenthood or something. They're protesting like a thing that they are against ethically or religiously or whatever, right? Like I don't like those. I wish they would go away, but I at least can see from their side why. But K-pop concert, like I didn't see like I mean there were a lot of queer people there, but I don't think those guys were like thinking along those lines. And this just really bugged me, because it was like they were trying to take away something and they were being so hateful, just all hellfire and brimstone. No, like, Jesus loves you or anything. At least the guys with megaphones who say that, God loves you and Jesus loves all his children or whatever, at least they're giving a nice message. These guys are just telling us that we're all going to burn. So I kept wondering, like, do they like get people with this strategy? Do they somehow convince people to join up by taking this approach? Like, I can't envision at a single event that they would protest that any single person would like even go up and be like, tell me more, let alone be like, what, you're right. Like, I'm gonna turn around and go to church or whatever, right? Like, you just I didn't get it, right? I was like, this surely can't work. And it doesn't. It doesn't work to recruit anybody. It doesn't work at all. So why did they do it, huh? Why did they do it? Well, the answer is actually more simple than it seems. They don't do it to get people in. They are doing it because the leadership doesn't want them getting out. See, the sect of Christianity that these guys belong to, as well as many other extremist sects, are rather cult-like. And whether or not you like the word cult, I'm just using it as a catch-all term for a organization that is using some kind of religious or social guidance to orient people's lives in a way that is, you know, basically blind devotion. So these guys who were protesting at the BTS concert, I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just trying to give objective facts that these guys were big. They're big guys and they were not very attractive. And the weight doesn't make them not attractive. They're two separate things. And I'm just telling you that these guys happen to be both. And I think that when you have somebody who's already at a social disadvantage and then you have control of them, the last thing you want for them to do is to, start learning and start giving other people grace and start trying to be understanding. Because if they do all those things, they won't blindly follow the orders anymore. They won't blindly trust their leader. Because the thing is perspective is what allows you to grow and learn as a person. A lot of people say that everybody should be forced to travel the world because encountering other cultures and other people and learning their ways, that's what makes you a more complete person. And living in, the society where, let's not lie, there's still a lot of social segregation, especially in the United States. Like, I don't want to go on this particular diatribe right now, but segregation is actually still very real. It's just not called that anymore for obvious reasons. But, you know, I grew up in an area that was very white and I wasn't exposed to a lot of people of color. And it took me an embarrassing long amount of time to learn a lot of things. And I was probably doing things that were harmful to those people and I didn't know. And ignorance is not really an excuse. It's only an excuse when you're a kid. When you're an adult, like, it kind of depends, but we have to try harder. And so when we end up in these highly insulated environments, and then, you know, especially if you're in a situation where somebody is exerting a lot of control and they're looking to keep that control for whatever reason they may have, I'm not going to pretend to understand exactly what a cult leader is looking for other than control. Those people know that when they send those men out to picket in front of the BTS concert and to scream at all these young women through megaphones about how they're going to hell, they know that all those young girls, all the young women, the men, even plenty at BTS, I'm telling you, they know that most people are gonna, what I did, flip them off, tell them to F the heck off, and that's that. And what does that do? It shows them that the world hates them. It reinforces that the outside world is not a good place for them. It is not an accepting place. It is not the place that they belong. By forcing them to act in such a obstinate and awful way, the people in control are basically guaranteeing that their people will hate them. And so they won't find any solace anywhere except the cult. And whether that's the church or the temple or the, you know, basement of somebody's house. Um, that's really what it boils down to. Is it's about keeping people in and making sure that they stay in. And again, I brought up, those men were at a social disadvantage, surely, because somebody like QT Cinderella is at an extreme social advantage. Yes, those men were also white, so we can cross that one off the list. But, if you are very attractive and, in the social paradigm of what is currently considered attractive via your body weight and shape, you know, Cutie Cinderella has all that going for her. And personally, if you were to ask my taste in women, I would have to tell you that Vanilla Mace is way more my type. Like, That girl is hot as fire, but that is neither here nor there. When you're working at a social disadvantage, you are vulnerable, and being vulnerable makes it easy to control you. When you're not vulnerable, when you have all the power, you can decide so easily, and you can decide to do whatever you want. And so the fact that you would decide to, keep the company of bad people and then say that it's because you just want to love and you don't fight hate with hate and everything. Like, nobody is asking you to fight hate with hate. People are asking you to close your gate to the people who are harming people that you love, that you supposedly care about, that are supposedly your friends and your family. You've got to close the gate, cutie. That's what people want. And I mean, heck, we saw this whole social vulnerability cult mentality take effect with Trump both times. The MAGA movement is following a leader basically blindly based on nothing but thinking that he knows what's best for them. And a lot of these people, especially the first time he was elected, were people who felt forgotten and disenfranchised. And we can have a conversation about who MAGA voters are, but the truth is that people in rural communities are getting screwed a lot of the time. They don't have proper health care. They don't have proper food options. I know it's crazy for people who don't live in the United States, but the fact is that food deserts are a thing. Like, there are places where there just aren't grocery stores, restaurants, anything for miles. It's inhumane, and now with this term, they're shutting down hospitals, they're cutting benefits, they're cutting food credits, and those people, when they're scared, when they're vulnerable, when they're feeling like the world has forgotten them, like probably the guys at the BTS concert screaming at all of this audience, when you're scared and you feel like nobody understands you and nobody in this world wants you, who are you going to gravitate towards? The one person or people who are telling you that you matter and that they're going to help you and that they're going to take care of you. And so you can see how the BTS concert and the guys with the Bible quotes and the megaphones are some microcosm of the larger conservative movement happening in the world right now. So, yeah, with Cutie specifically, he is insulated. She's completely insulated. Like, look, I don't know her life. I haven't watched her streams. I honestly haven't given her too much thought before all this stuff happened. But if I had to guess based on what I saw, I would say that she hasn't had enough exposure to people who are not beautiful and white and cisgender, you know, just because her brother's trans doesn't mean that she has done anything to actually understand trans people. In fact, the evidence suggests that she doesn't, because, the whole stepdad thing. But in that stream, Judy was talking to two other beautiful white women. And I suspect that maybe part of why she didn't stop herself sooner, why she just kept going and going and felt safe to just say this really not good opinion, is that she can't see that other people who are like her would think differently than her. You know what I mean? If you're talking to, you're like, oh, I'm a beautiful white woman, and these are beautiful white women, and, they must be the same as me then. And we're all streamers, we're all, at this level, playing a game together. So, yeah, we must share opinions. And no, that's the problem with this level of insulation, is that you don't even see how other people like you could understand more than you do, because you assume that everybody's kind of working off the same amount of knowledge. That's how I felt before I started, having my eyes open before I started reading and watching things and actually making an effort to educate myself. The other big problem with this kind of social insulation is that you get a very warped perspective of good and bad. So everybody right now is like, Judy, you're so bad. And like, if you watch her first apology, I don't know if she's done another one by the time this comes out, but the first apology was really like not it. And I don't think she was getting why people were giving her so much crap. She didn't understand. She seemed so confused in the stream and certainly in the first apology why people were just absolutely hating on her because I'm positive that in her mind, because she's clearly been exposed to a lot of hate, like look at what she says about her stepdad or her dad. I can't remember. I'm sorry. So she's looking and she's going, well, compared to that hateful bastard, I'm awesome. I'm so accepting. I like, look at how hateful people can be, and I'm being so good. And it's like, yeah, you can be good, but like, you can obviously be better. And that's what people are asking for. They're asking for you to be better because you have a platform and a lot of power and you host awards shows. And so it's like, yeah, you kind of do have to do better. And I'm sorry if people out there feel like it's unrealistic to expect creators to like improve themselves. But I mean, you can choose to keep supporting them if they don't. I mean, look at the success of all kinds of IRL streamers and those people who are, in my opinion, a lot of very bad people are seeing a lot of success because people don't care if they get better. But if you want my opinion, usually asking somebody to change means you care about them. If you don't care about somebody at all, you can just click unsubscribe and never think about them again. But people clearly care about Cutie Cinderella and they want her to do better because they like she matters to them, you know? And I think that, if you're going to put yourself in the public eye, if you're going to put yourself in a position to get the platform that she has and the success she has, like nothing comes for free, right? Everything has a cost. And the cost of being famous and successful, especially as like just being yourself, not being like an actor or a singer, when you're just famous for being you, people are going to start putting expectations on you socially, and maybe some will be unreasonable, but when some are very reasonable, when some are kind of just bare minimum human decency, yeah, you do have to do better, like, in my opinion. Like, you really should if you want to be a decent human. Otherwise, you're just going to end up like what? Like, sorry, Gordy and who's that other guy who ended up in a Filipino prison? Like, and I think that that is the word I would use to describe overall what Cutie Cinderella's response to her whole tirade has been, which is like just confused. She's confused because she's been so insulated and had such a warped, such a narrow perspective during her life. And maybe she's younger than I think she is, or maybe she really is just now meeting people who are different than her and are expecting more of her. I would certainly hope that's not the case because, like, I'm pretty sure she's been pretty famous for a while. But I think more than not accepting the pushback, she's just confused because, again, she has this headspace of, like, well, I'm so good because, like, look how bad people can be. And it's like, well, yeah, but like that's setting the bar pretty low. If you're like, well, I'm better than a person who's overtly transphobic, like, wow, congrats. Like, are you tripping on the bar because it's like on the ground right now? And speaking of the whole perspective thing, I think that that actually leads quite nicely into what I wanted to say about Hassan's response. So I watched Hassan's response like through one of his clips channels, or like the channels who clip his streams on YouTube. And then I watched my personal favorite drama YouTuber, Adam McIntyre. I mentioned him before. I love you, Adam. So I watched his response to Hasan's response. Responses to responses to responses. And Adam had some big problems with Hasan's take, and I don't blame him. I'm gonna say right now, I like Hasan, but I'm not above saying that, yeah, much like Kitty, he really could have and should have done better. And again, I do think that maybe we're seeing some having a higher standard, a higher expectation from people who are like generally advocates for like marginalized people. And so if they're not immediately jumping to the forefront of it, then they must be, hiding something, or they're not doing their part, or whatever. So I think that there is some perspective to be kept there, but please hear me out. So the first problem with Hassan's response was that like he didn't watch the whole like section of the stream where Cutie was like going on that rant. He was just like, "Oh yeah, I saw some clips, but like whatever, I'm just gonna say my response without having seen it." And like I I agree that in a lot of like regular drama cases, you don't need to see the whole clip or the whole section to understand or say a response. But in this case, it kind of did matter because the the content of what she said informs the anger. And much like her not saying things well, he then went on to say a bunch of stuff not well. And that's why somebody like Adam was so mad. And that's why I totally get why he was mad. And I guess even though I am queer, I am disabled and everything, I still consider myself so privileged that like I'm still able to give Hassan grace, I suppose. And look, I'm not saying that you would never call out your friends or don't ever call out your friends if they start spewing some garbage, okay? I've had to call out a friend who later vanished on me. That's kind of a whole other story. I might do a video on the whole granola to QAnon pipeline and how that personally affected me. Let me know in the comments if you would like me to share my opinion on that story. But yeah, I'm not saying that you would never do that. I agree that you should hold your friends accountable. I mean, if you're going to call them your friends, then you better hold them accountable for what is coming out of their mouth. But I'm going to call you a dirty liar if you're sitting here and telling me that in any case where it's a friend or a close family member, somebody that you have had a high opinion of saying something that suddenly is catching you off guard, that you wouldn't be a little more gentle with them than you would through the screen to a stranger. Like, obviously, it's so much easier to just pile hate on somebody when you're anonymous, when you don't have to look them in the eye, when you don't know anything about them. It's so easy to criticize. And it's always easier to give the advice than to take it. I give myself plenty of good advice, but I very seldom follow it. Anyway, obviously, Hassan is friends with Cutie Cinderella. He hosts a podcast with her, so like he's gonna tread more lightly than another person would, right? But the real problem with what he said is that the way he phrased it, it really came across like he was saying that basically marginalized people have to just keep being patient forever and, just hold out hope that people will come around and that love really does beat hate and all this stuff. And like it did come across like that. Now, as a person who, due to an emotionally traumatic upbringing, has very much learned to read between every possible line to try to like anticipate what somebody might really be saying behind the surface, because I had to do that in order to make sure that other people wouldn't emotionally react on me in a way that I wasn't ready to predict or handle, because I was made to be responsible for emotional reactions. All of that is to say that I think what someone was really trying to say is that people like us, people who are sort of in the middle, who are not being actively oppressed, hunted, terrorized, especially in the United States, queer people, people of color, trans people. These people are not the ones who should be given grace. They're not the ones who should be, oh, let me just gently give you a lesson. Those people should be well within their rights to slam that gate shut and say, you're not allowed on my lawn anymore. They're allowed to do that. And hell, oftentimes they should. And a lot of people give a lot of other people more chances than they deserve. And I love that. I'm a person who has always given way too many chances to people who didn't deserve it. I mean, think about the guy who punched me. I didn't break up with him right at that moment. So there you go. But the people in between, the people like me who, yes, I am queer, but I'm not really like visibly non-binary, you know what I mean? I'm not visibly bisexual, pansexual. I'm in a very safe, privileged place to be able to speak up and speak out and like literally just like cutie Cinderella. And so I think Hasan was saying that people like us who are not being, who are in this privileged but adjacent, like, gosh, and I'm not going to cut all this stuttering out because, again, I want to be authentic here and I'm trying to find the words. But the truth is that, like, what are the words? Well, people in between, the people who are, I don't like the word ally because it's another word that's just been used and misused to death. It doesn't feel good anymore to say ally because, like, it's performative often, and it's often a way that people just get out of doing anything by just saying or labeling themselves as an ally. But I do think that that's really who Hassan was talking to in his response when he was talking more about, like, he was like, I know Cutie, I know her intentions, she has a good heart, and again, like, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. It's sad, but it is really true. And so I think he was talking to like the adjacent people, and like all of that said, he did sound like he was telling like actively oppressed people to just like be more patient and like don't be so like quick to give up on people. And it's like, no, they shouldn't have to shoulder that burden anymore. Like people who are currently actively being oppressed, and that number appears to be growing somehow now, and especially in the United States. They've they've shouldered enough. Okay, they're shouldering currently more than enough, more than their share. So yeah, Hassan's take was not great. I can say that. Ultimately, what I'd like you to take away from this video is that you are who you hang out with. And listen, a lot of people, most people, don't like change. I am one of those people. I hate change. Change is terrifying, okay? And for that reason, a lot of people hang on to friends for way longer than they should because, well, we've been friends for so long and friendship breakups are really, really hard. I'll probably do a video on that too. Um, or, you have family members who connected to other family members that you don't want to lose. There is a difference between just passively allowing whatever to happen in your presence, which is what it sounds like Cutie is doing with her like weird like love beats all Care Bears take. So just maybe think about taking a look at the kinds of things that you allow to happen on your lawn. Your boundaries are yours. You can't tell other people what to do. You absolutely can control what you allow to happen in your vicinity. So I would like to encourage everybody to just reevaluate what you allow on your lawn and if there's anything that maybe you should sweep on out of there. Otherwise, like, do take it away that you are what you eat. You are who you hang out with. The manager who keeps a bad employee will lose all the good employees. So please take this seriously and do what's right for you, but also what's right for like humanity. Like you can have your own opinions until they start infringing on other people's right to exist, okay? That's how I feel. That's, I think, how it should be at least. I guess that's all I wanted to say about this subject. So I really hope that everybody is out there just taking care of themselves, bringing yourself peace when you can, and hopefully those of us who have the power can keep fighting to pick you up and carry you for a while. You deserve it. Remember, stay happy and stay healthy because you are precious.